Celestine stood in the shadowed corridor outside the library. Her hand rested on the cold brass doorknob. She could hear voices inside. One of them was his, the Duke of Ashford, Alistair. Her breath caught in her throat. She had come to tell him something important, something she had kept hidden for 3 years. But now she heard another sound, laughter. His laughter. It was warm and deep, the kind of laugh she had only heard once before, on the night they danced together at the spring ball, before everything changed. But he was not laughing with her now. A woman's voice rose in response, light and musical, the kind of voice that belonged to someone beautiful, someone who fit into his world. Celestine's hand fell away from the doorknob. Her chest felt tight, like something inside her was breaking. She took a step back, then another. She had been too late. The realization settled over her like cold water. She had waited too long, held her feelings too close, and now someone else had taken the place she had dreamed of. She turned and walked away. Her footsteps made no sound on the thick carpet. Behind her, the laughter continued, but Celestine did not hear it anymore. All she heard was the pounding of her own heart. Celestine had always been invisible, not in the way ghosts are invisible, but in the way quiet people become invisible in loud rooms. She was the daughter of a country vicar. Her family had no title, no fortune, no connections to the great families of England. She had come to Ashford Manor 3 years ago. Her father had died that winter. Her mother had followed him 6 months later. Celestine had nowhere to go, no money, no future. Lady Margaret, the Duke's aunt, had taken pity on her. She offered Celestine a position as her companion. It was not quite a servant's role, but it was not quite a guest's role either. Celestine lived in a strange, in-between place. She took meals with the family when there were no important visitors. She sat in the drawing room and read aloud when Lady Margaret's eyes grew tired. She walked in the gardens and fetched shawls and listened to endless stories about the past. And she watched Alistair. She had not meant to fall in love with him. It had happened slowly, like the way frost creeps across a window. At first she noticed only small things. The way he smiled at his younger sister, the way he listened to his steward's reports with genuine interest, the way he never spoke down to the servants. Then she noticed larger things. The way his eyes looked when he read by the fire, green and bright and full of thoughts he never spoke aloud. The way his hands moved when he worked on his estate accounts, strong and careful. And finally, she noticed the way her heart changed when he entered a room. It was a hopeless love. She knew that. Dukes did not marry vicars' daughters. They married women with titles and dowries and important families. But knowing something and feeling something are different things. So Celestine had loved him in silence. She had built a whole world inside her heart, a world where he might see her, might know her, might choose her. But now that world was crumbling. She walked through the manor like a ghost. Her mind replayed the sound of his laughter, over and over. Who was the woman? Someone new? Someone from London? Celestine reached her small room on the 3rd floor. It was tucked away in a corner. A servant's room that had been made slightly more comfortable for Lady Margaret's companion. She sat on the narrow bed. Her hands shook. She had been so close to telling him. That morning she had decided. No more waiting, no more fear. She would tell him the truth, that she loved him, that she had always loved him, that she knew nothing could come of it, but she needed him to know. But fate had stopped her. Fate had shown her the truth first. He had already moved on. He was laughing with someone else, building a world with someone else. And Celestine was too late. She did not sleep that night. She lay in the darkness and listened to the manor settle around her. Old wood creaking, wind rattling the windows. Somewhere far below, a door closed. Her mind would not stop working. She kept trying to remember when things had changed. 3 months ago, Alistair had been different. He had sought her out more often. He had asked her opinion on books, on music, on the changes he wanted to make to the estate gardens. He had looked at her in a way that made her believe, made her hope. But then he had gone to London for the season. He had been gone for 6 weeks, and when he returned, something had shifted. He was polite, distant. He no longer asked her questions. He no longer looked at her with those bright green eyes. Celestine had told herself it meant nothing, that he was busy, that he had important matters to attend to. But now she understood. He had met someone in London, someone who made him laugh, someone who belonged in his world. Tears slid down her cheeks. She did not wipe them away. Morning came too soon. Celestine rose and dressed in her simple gray gown. She pinned her dark hair back carefully. Her face in the mirror looked pale. There were shadows under her eyes. She looked like someone who had lost something important. She went downstairs to attend to Lady Margaret. The old woman was already awake and sitting in her favorite chair by the window. "Good morning, Celestine," Lady Margaret said. Her voice was warm. She was a kind woman, one of the few people who had ever seen Celestine as more than a shadow. "Good morning, my lady," Celestine replied. Her voice sounded normal. That surprised her. "You look tired, dear. Did you not sleep well?" Celestine forced a small smile. "I am well. Only a slight headache." Lady Margaret studied her with sharp eyes. The old woman missed very little, but she did not press. "We have a guest arriving today," Lady Margaret said. "Lady Vivian Harcourt. She is the daughter of the Earl of Pembroke, a lovely girl, very accomplished." Celestine's stomach tightened. "Is she staying long?" "A week, I believe, perhaps longer." Lady Margaret's tone was casual, but there was something beneath it, something Celestine could not quite name. "She is a friend of the family?" Celestine asked carefully. "A friend of Alistair's," Lady Margaret said. "They met in London this season. He invited her to visit Ashford Manor." So that was it. The woman in the library, Lady Vivian. Celestine's hands tightened in her lap. She kept her face calm, empty. "How wonderful," she said. The words tasted like ash. Lady Vivian arrived that afternoon. Celestine watched from an upper window as the carriage rolled up the drive. It was a fine carriage, black and polished, with the Pembroke crest painted on the door. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Celestine's breath caught. Lady Vivian was beautiful. There was no other word for it. She had golden hair that caught the sunlight. Her dress was a soft blue silk that moved like water. Even from a distance, Celestine could see her graceful movements. Alistair came out to greet her. He smiled. That same warm smile Celestine had seen so rarely. He offered his arm. Lady Vivian took it with a laugh. They looked perfect together. Celestine turned away from the window. She pressed her hand against her chest. It hurt to breathe. She had known this day would come. She had always known. But knowing and experiencing are different things. She sat down on a wooden chair. Her legs felt weak. Someone knocked on the door. "Miss Celestine?" It was one of the maids. "Lady Margaret requests your presence in the drawing room." Celestine stood. She smoothed her grey dress. She lifted her chin. She would face this. She had no choice. The drawing room was bright with afternoon sun. Lady Margaret sat in her usual chair. Alistair stood by the fireplace, and beside him, on the sofa, sat Lady Vivian. Up close, she was even more beautiful. Her eyes were a clear blue. Her skin was flawless. She wore a pearl necklace that must have cost more than Celestine would earn in 10 years. "Ah, Celestine," Lady Margaret said. "Come in, dear. I want you to meet our guest." Celestine stepped forward. She kept her expression pleasant, neutral. "Lady Vivian, this is Miss Celestine Grey. She is my companion and a dear friend." Lady Vivian's gaze swept over Celestine. It was not unkind, but it was the look of someone assessing a piece of furniture, noting it, dismissing it. "How do you do, Miss Grey?" Lady Vivian said. Her voice was as lovely as the rest of her. "A pleasure to meet you, Lady Vivian," Celestine replied. She curtsied slightly. Alistair had not looked at her once. He stood with his hands behind his back. His expression was polite, distant, the same expression he wore when discussing business matters with his steward. Celestine has been with us for 3 years, Lady Margaret continued. She is quite accomplished in music and literature, a wonderful reader. How charming, Lady Vivian said, but her attention had already shifted back to Alistair. Your Grace, you must show me the gardens you mentioned. I am most eager to see them. Of course, Alistair said. He smiled at her. They are at their best this time of year. He offered his arm again. Lady Vivian rose gracefully. She placed her hand on his sleeve. They walked toward the door together. As they passed, Alistair's eyes flickered briefly toward Celestine. Just for a moment. She could not read his expression. Then they were gone. Lady Margaret sighed. She is a lovely girl, is she not? Celestine's throat felt tight. Very lovely. Alistair seems quite taken with her. Yes, Celestine whispered. Lady Margaret looked at her for a long moment. Her expression was sad, knowing, but she said nothing more. Celestine threw herself into work. She read to Lady Margaret for hours. She organized the library. She helped with the household accounts. Anything to keep her mind busy. But every evening, she heard the laughter. Alistair and Lady Vivian dined with the family. They walked in the gardens. They played cards in the drawing room. And they laughed together. It was torture. But Celestine could not look away. She told herself she was being foolish, that she should leave, find another position, another life. But leaving meant never seeing him again, and she was not ready for that. Not yet. On the 3rd night of Lady Vivian's visit, something strange happened. Celestine was in the library. It was late. Everyone else had retired. She liked the library at night. It was quiet, peaceful. She was returning a book to its shelf when she heard voices in the corridor outside. Are you certain? A woman's voice, Lady Vivian. Quite certain. A man's voice, but not Alistair, someone else, lower, rougher. Celestine froze. And no one suspects? Lady Vivian asked. No one, the man replied. The Duke trusts you completely. There was a pause. Celestine's heart pounded. She moved closer to the door. Good, Lady Vivian said. We must move carefully. If he discovers the truth too soon, everything will be ruined. What about the girl? The companion? Celestine's breath stopped. Miss Grey? Lady Vivian laughed. It was not a kind laugh. She is nothing. A mouse in the corner. No one listens to her. No one sees her. The words hit like a slap. Still, the man said, she watches everything. We should be careful. I am always careful, Lady Vivian said coldly. Now go, before someone sees you. Footsteps moved away. Celestine heard a door close in the distance. She stood in the darkness of the library. Her hands trembled. What had she just heard? Lady Vivian was planning something that involved deceiving Alistair. And that man, who was he? Celestine's mind raced. She knew she should tell someone, tell Alistair. But would he believe her? She was nothing, a mouse in the corner. Lady Vivian was right about that. Still, she had to try. The next morning, Celestine sought out Alistair. She found him in his study. He was working at his desk. Papers spread before him. His dark hair fell across his forehead. He looked tired. She knocked softly on the open door. He looked up. Surprise flashed across his face. Miss Grey. Your Grace, she said. Her voice was steady. May I speak with you? It is important. He set down his pen. Of course. Please, come in. She stepped inside. The study smelled of leather and ink. It was a room she had always liked, a room that felt like him. "What is it?" he asked. His tone was polite, but there was a wariness in his eyes. Celestine hesitated. How could she explain what she had heard? It sounded like jealousy, like the desperate attempt of a woman scorned. But it was not that. She was certain. "It concerns Lady Vivian," she began carefully. His expression shifted, became guarded. "Go on." "Last night I overheard a conversation. She was speaking with a man. I do not know who he was, but they were discussing a deception, something they are planning." Alistair's jaw tightened. "What exactly did you hear?" Celestine repeated the conversation as best she could remember. She watched his face, looking for belief, for trust, but what she saw was disappointment. "Miss Grey," he said slowly, "I understand that Lady Vivian's presence here may be difficult for you." Celestine's stomach dropped. "That is not, but I must ask you to be cautious about making accusations based on fragments of conversation. Lady Vivian is a respected woman from a noble family. Such claims could damage her reputation unfairly." The words were like ice water. He did not believe her. Celestine's face flushed. "I am not making accusations, Your Grace. I am simply reporting what I heard." "And I appreciate your concern," he said. His tone was kind, but final. "However, I think perhaps you misunderstood what you heard. Conversations taken out of context can sound very different from their true meaning." He thought she was lying, or worse, imagining things. Celestine lifted her chin. Pride burned in her chest. "Of course, Your Grace. I apologize for disturbing you." She turned to leave. "Miss Grey." She paused, did not look back. "I do not wish for there to be any awkwardness during Lady Vivian's visit. I hope we can all be civil." Civil, as if she were the problem. "Of course," she said quietly. Then she left. Celestine returned to her room. She closed the door, leaned against it. Her hands shook with anger and humiliation. He had dismissed her, treated her like a jealous child. But she knew what she had heard. Lady Vivian was planning something that would hurt Alistair. And if he would not believe her, she would have to prove it herself. She sat at her small writing desk. She pulled out a piece of paper and began to make notes. What did she know? Lady Vivian had come from London. She had met Alistair during the season. He had invited her to Ashford Manor. She was wealthy, connected, beautiful. But she was also planning something with an unknown man, something secretive. Celestine needed to know more. She needed to find out who the man was, what they were planning, and why. But how? She was a companion. She had no power, no authority. She could not simply demand answers. She would have to investigate quietly, carefully, like a mouse in the corner. That evening, Celestine paid close attention to Lady Vivian. She watched her at dinner, the way she smiled at Alistair, the way she touched his hand when she thought no one was looking. It all seemed genuine, warm. But Celestine knew better now. She had heard the coldness in Lady Vivian's voice, had heard her laugh at the idea of Celestine being a threat. After dinner, the family gathered in the drawing room. Lady Margaret requested that Celestine read aloud from a novel. Celestine agreed. She sat near the lamp and opened the book. As she read, she watched. Lady Vivian sat close to Alistair. She laughed at his comments. She asked him questions about the estate, about his family. She was charming, attentive, but there was something calculated about it, something too perfect. Halfway through the chapter, a servant entered. He handed Lady Vivian a folded note. Celestine watched from the corner of her eye. Lady Vivian opened the note. Her expression did not change, but her fingers tightened on the paper. She stood gracefully. "Please excuse me. I have a slight headache. I think I shall retire early." "Of course," Alistair said. He looked concerned. Shall I call for a maid? No, I am perfectly well, only tired. She smiled at him. Then she left the room. Celestine continued reading, but her mind was elsewhere. A note, delivered in the evening. What did it say? She finished the chapter. Lady Margaret thanked her. Alistair barely looked at her. Celestine excused herself. She went upstairs, but she did not go to her room. She went to Lady Vivian's room. The corridor was empty, dark except for a few candles in wall sconces. Celestine moved quietly. Her heart hammered in her chest. What was she doing? This was madness. If she were caught, she would be dismissed, ruined. But she had to know. She reached Lady Vivian's door. She pressed her ear against it. Silence. She tried the handle. It was unlocked. She opened the door a crack. The room was empty. Where was Lady Vivian? Celestine slipped inside. She closed the door softly behind her. The room was beautiful, much larger than Celestine's. The bed had a canopy. The furniture was polished and fine. On the writing desk, Celestine saw papers. She moved closer. Her hands shook. The note from earlier lay on top. Celestine picked it up. The handwriting was rough, masculine. Meet me at the old chapel. Midnight. We must discuss the next step. Celestine's breath caught. The old chapel. There was a ruined chapel on the edge of the estate. No one went there anymore. Midnight. She looked at the clock on the mantel. It was just past 10. She had 2 hours. Celestine returned to her room. She changed into a dark cloak. She could not risk being seen. At 11:30 she left the manor. She used the servants' entrance. The night was cold and clear. Stars shone overhead. She walked quickly across the grounds. Her breath misted in the air. The old chapel stood alone in a field. Its roof was half collapsed. Ivy covered the stone walls. Celestine approached carefully. She stayed in the shadows of the trees. She could see candlelight inside the chapel, flickering through the broken windows. Voices. She crept closer, found a place where she could see and hear without being seen. Lady Vivian stood in the center of the chapel. She wore a dark cloak. Her golden hair was hidden beneath a hood. Beside her stood a man. He was tall, rough-looking, not a gentleman. "Is everything ready?" Lady Vivian asked. "Yes," the man said. "The papers are forged perfectly. No one will suspect." "And you are certain they will hold up to examination?" "Certain," the man replied. "Once the Duke signs them, everything will transfer to your control." Celestine's blood ran cold. Papers. Forged. Transfer of control. "Good," Lady Vivian said. "He trusts me completely now. It will not be difficult to convince him to sign. He believes we are to be married." The man laughed. "And once the papers are signed?" "Once they are signed, I will take everything. The estate, the fortune, all of it." Lady Vivian's voice was sharp, cruel. "And the Duke will be left with nothing." Celestine pressed her hand to her mouth. Bile rose in her throat. It was a plot, a scheme to steal everything from Alistair. "What about the marriage?" the man asked. "There will be no marriage," Lady Vivian said coldly. "Once I have what I need, I will disappear. By the time he realizes what has happened, it will be too late." "Clever," the man said. "I have been planning this for over a year," Lady Vivian said. "The Duke of Ashford is wealthy, powerful, and foolish enough to believe that a woman like me could love him for anything other than his fortune." The words were like knives. Celestine had heard enough. She needed to get back, needed to warn Alistair. She turned to leave, but her foot caught on a root. She stumbled, made a sound. The voices inside stopped. "What was that?" the man asked. Celestine ran. She ran through the darkness, her cloak tangled around her legs. Behind her she heard shouts. They were coming after her. Celestine's lungs burned. She did not know the grounds as well in the dark. She stumbled over uneven ground. A hand grabbed her arm. She cried out, tried to pull away. "Stop!" a voice commanded. Not the man from the chapel, a different voice. She turned. Alistair. He stood in the moonlight. His face was shadowed, unreadable. "Your Grace," she gasped. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded. His grip on her arm was firm. Before she could answer, two figures emerged from the trees, Lady Vivian and the man. They stopped when they saw Alistair. Lady Vivian's face went pale. Then she recovered. Her expression shifted, became frightened. "Your Grace," she said breathlessly. "Thank goodness. This woman was spying on me." Alistair looked between them, his jaw tight. "Is this true, Miss Grey?" he asked. Celestine's heart pounded. "Yes, but not for the reason she claims." "She is obsessed with you," Lady Vivian said quickly. "I have seen the way she watches you. She is jealous. She followed me here to harm me." "That is a lie," Celestine said. Her voice shook. "I followed you because I overheard your conversation in the manor. I knew you were planning something, and I was right." "You see," Lady Vivian said to Alistair. "She admits to spying. She is unbalanced, dangerous." The man beside Lady Vivian shifted. His hand moved toward his coat. Alistair saw it. His expression changed, became sharp. "Who is this man, Lady Vivian?" he asked. His tone was cold. He is no one. A servant," Lady Vivian stammered. "Then why are you meeting him in secret, at midnight?" Lady Vivian's face flushed. "Tell me the truth," Alistair said. His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. The man moved, pulled something from his coat. A knife. Everything happened quickly. The man lunged at Alistair. Celestine screamed. Alistair dodged. His hand shot out, caught the man's wrist. They struggled. The knife glinted in the moonlight. Celestine looked around wildly. She saw a fallen branch. She grabbed it. Without thinking, she swung it at the man's head. It connected with a dull thud. The man staggered, dropped the knife. Alistair shoved him to the ground, pinned him. "Run for help," Alistair ordered Celestine. "Get the groundskeeper, now!" Celestine ran. An hour later, the man was locked in the estate's cellar. The groundskeeper and two other men stood guard. Lady Vivian sat in Alistair's study. Her face was like stone. Alistair stood by the fireplace. Celestine stood near the door. She was still shaking. "Explain," Alistair said to Lady Vivian. "Everything." Lady Vivian said nothing. "I heard it all," Celestine said quietly. "The plan to forge papers, to steal the estate, to deceive you into signing away everything." Alistair's eyes closed briefly. Pain flickered across his face. "Is this true?" he asked Lady Vivian. Still, she said nothing. "Answer me," he said. His voice was raw. "Yes," Lady Vivian said finally. Her voice was flat. "It is true." The silence that followed was terrible. "Why?" Alistair asked. She laughed. It was a bitter sound. "Because men like you have everything. Title, wealth, power, while the rest of us must beg for scraps." "You are the daughter of an earl," Alistair said. "You are not poor." "My father is bankrupt," Lady Vivian spat. "He has gambled away everything. We have nothing left but the title. I needed money, your money." "So you planned to steal it?" "I planned to take what I deserved," she said. "What is the difference? You would have wasted it on your precious estate, your precious tenants. I would have used it properly." Alistair stared at her. "I trusted you." You were a fool, she said coldly. He turned away. His shoulders were stiff. Leave, he said. Take your belongings and leave my house. I will not have you arrested, but if you ever return, I will not be so merciful. Lady Vivian stood. She looked at Celestine. Her eyes were full of hate. You, she said, this is your doing. No, Celestine said quietly. This is yours. Lady Vivian swept from the room. Celestine and Alistair stood alone in the study. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had picked up. Thank you, Alistair said finally. If you had not followed her, if you had not warned me. You did not believe me, Celestine said. The words came out before she could stop them. He turned to face her. I know. You thought I was jealous, that I was lying. Yes, he said. His voice was heavy with regret. I did. Why? She had to ask, had to know. He was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, looked out at the dark grounds. Because I was afraid, he said. Celestine's breath caught. Afraid of what? Of believing you, of what it would mean if you were telling the truth. I do not understand. He turned back to her. His eyes were bright with emotion. Lady Vivian was safe. She was a choice that made sense. She fit into my world. She was everything a duchess should be. And I am not, Celestine said. The words hurt to speak. No, he said. You are not. She looked down, her hands twisted together. You are so much more, he continued. Her head snapped up. He stepped closer. You are kind, intelligent, brave. You see the world with clear eyes. You care about people, about truth. Celestine's heart hammered. Your Grace. When you came to me with your warning, I dismissed you, because accepting that Lady Vivian was deceiving me meant accepting something else. What? She whispered. That I had chosen wrong, that I had been running from what I truly wanted. The room felt very small, very warm. What do you want? Celestine asked. Her voice was barely audible. He stood directly in front of her now, so close she could see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. You, he said. I want you. The world seemed to stop. That is impossible, she said, but her voice shook. Why? Because I am no one. I have no fortune, no title, no family. You are everything, he said fiercely. Do you not understand? For 3 years you have been the only person who truly sees me, who knows me. Tears burned in Celestine's eyes. You invited Lady Vivian here. You laughed with her. I was trying to forget you, he said. I was trying to be practical, to do what was expected, to marry someone appropriate. Why? The question broke from her lips. Because loving you was terrifying, he said. Because you made me feel things I had never felt before. Because I knew that if I let myself love you, I would never be able to stop. The tears spilled over. You love me? I have loved you since the day you corrected my Latin translation in the library, he said. A small smile touched his lips. You were so certain, so unafraid to tell a duke he was wrong. Celestine laughed through her tears. She remembered that day. She had been mortified afterward. But I thought, the laughter. I heard you laughing with her, and I realized I was too late. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You heard us in the library, the first day she arrived. Celestine nodded. She was telling me about a scandal in London, about a mutual acquaintance. The laughter meant nothing. He reached out, touched her cheek. But you thought I had moved on. Yes, she whispered. You were going to tell me something that day. What was it? She looked up at him, at his face, the face she had loved for so long. I was going to tell you that I loved you, she said. That I had always loved you. even though I knew it was impossible. "Say it again," he said. His thumb brushed away her tears. "I love you," she said. "I love you, Alistair." He pulled her close. His arms wrapped around her. She felt his heart beating against hers. "I love you, Celestine," he said into her hair. "I love you so much." They stood like that for a long time, holding each other. Two people who had been alone finally finding home. But the world does not stop for love. The next morning, news of Lady Vivian's plot spread through the household. Servants whispered. Lady Margaret was horrified, and the man in the cellar, when questioned properly, revealed more. His name was Thomas Blake. He was a forger and con artist. He had worked with Lady Vivian on 3 other schemes. They had stolen from 2 other noblemen before setting their sights on Alistair. The authorities were called. Blake was taken away. Lady Vivian had already fled, but warrants were issued for her arrest. The scandal was enormous. Within days, word reached London. The newspapers printed stories. Some were accurate, many were not. The Duke of Ashford had nearly been ruined by a beautiful con artist. He had been saved by his companion, a nobody, a vicar's daughter. Some papers praised Celestine's bravery. Others questioned her motives. Was she a heroine or a social climber? Alistair was furious. He wanted to sue every paper that printed lies about Celestine, but Celestine stopped him. "Let them talk," she said. "It does not matter." "It matters to me," he said. They were in the garden. The roses were blooming, pink and white and red. "You know the truth," she said. "Your family knows. That is enough." "Is it?" He looked at her. "Celestine, if you and I, the scandal will be even worse." She had thought about this. All night she had thought about it. "I know," she said. "They will say terrible things about you, about us." "I know." He took her hands. "I do not want you to suffer because of me." She smiled. "I suffered more when I thought I had lost you." "But society can accept us or not. I do not care." She squeezed his hands. "Alistair, I have spent 3 years invisible, watching life from the shadows. I do not want to hide anymore." "You will be a duchess," he said. "They will have to accept you." "They will hate me for it," she said honestly. "I will be the woman who trapped a duke, who rose above her station." "You did not trap me. I am choosing you, freely." "I know that. You know that. But they will not see it that way." He pulled her close. "Then we will face them together." She leaned into him, felt his strength. Together. But there was still one more obstacle. Lady Margaret called Celestine to her rooms that afternoon. The old woman sat in her chair by the window. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her expression was serious. "Sit down, child," she said. Celestine sat. Her stomach was tight with nerves. "I know what has happened between you and my nephew," Lady Margaret said. Celestine's face flushed. "My lady." Lady Margaret held up a hand. "Let me speak." Celestine fell silent. "I have watched you these past 3 years," Lady Margaret said. "I have seen the way you look at him, and the way he looks at you." "I never meant—" "I know," Lady Margaret said. "Love is not something we plan. It simply happens." Celestine waited. "Alistair told me this morning that he intends to marry you," Lady Margaret continued. "He asked for my blessing." Celestine's heart stopped. "What did you say?" Lady Margaret was quiet for a moment. Her eyes were distant, sad. "I told him about my own story," she said finally. "I was young once, very young, and I fell in love with a man who was not suitable. He was a soldier, no title, no fortune." Celestine leaned forward. She had never heard this story. "I wanted to marry him," Lady Margaret said. But my family forbade it. They said I would shame them, that I would ruin myself. What did you do? I obeyed them, Lady Margaret said. Her voice was bitter. I let him go. I married a man of my own class, a lord. He was cold and cruel. I was miserable for 40 years. Tears shone in the old woman's eyes. He died 10 years ago, she said, and I was finally free. But by then, it was too late. My soldier had died in the war. I never saw him again. Celestine reached out, took Lady Margaret's hand. Do not make my mistake, Lady Margaret said fiercely. Do not let fear or propriety steal your happiness. But the scandal. Let them talk, Lady Margaret said. Let the whole world talk. You love him. He loves you. That is all that matters. Celestine's eyes filled with tears. Are you certain? I have never been more certain of anything. Lady Margaret squeezed her hand. Marry him, Celestine. Be happy. For both of us. Alistair proposed 3 days later. He did not do it in a grand way. There was no audience, no spectacle. He simply found her in the library, the same library where she had once overheard his laughter and thought she was too late. Celestine, he said. She looked up from her book. Yes? He knelt beside her chair, took her hand. I know we have talked about this, he said, but I want to do this properly. Her breath caught. Celestine Gray, he said, you are the bravest, kindest, most remarkable woman I have ever known. You saved my life, my fortune. But more than that, you saved my heart. Tears slid down her cheeks. I do not care what society says. I do not care about titles or propriety or scandal. I only care about you. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a ring. Will you marry me? The ring was beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. It had belonged to his mother. Yes, she said. Yes, yes, yes. He slid the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, pulled her into his arms. He kissed her. It was her first kiss. It was soft and warm and perfect. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. We will face everything together, he said. Together, she agreed. The wedding was planned for 2 months later. It was not a grand society wedding. Alistair had wanted that, had wanted to show the world that he was proud to marry Celestine. But Celestine had asked for something quieter, something more intimate. So they were married in the small chapel on the estate, the one that was still used, not the ruined one where Lady Vivian's plot had been revealed. Lady Margaret was there, and Alistair's sister, and a few close friends. Celestine wore a simple white dress, no jewels except the sapphire ring. She walked down the aisle alone. She had no father to give her away, but she did not feel alone. Alistair waited at the altar. He wore dark blue, his eyes shone. When she reached him, he took her hands. The vicar spoke the words, the ancient vows, and when Alistair said, I do, his voice was strong and clear. When Celestine said, I do, she felt as if her heart would burst. They were pronounced husband and wife. Alistair kissed her, and the small gathering applauded. The scandal did not die quickly. London society was outraged. A duke marrying his aunt's companion. It was unheard of. Some families cut ties with the Ashfords, some refused invitations, but others were curious. They wanted to meet the woman who had captured a duke's heart, who had saved him from ruin. Celestine attended her first ball as the Duchess of Ashford 3 months after the wedding. She was terrified. She wore a gown of deep emerald green. Alistair had insisted she visit the finest modiste in London. The dress was beautiful, but Celestine felt like an imposter. You are a duchess, Alistair reminded her in the carriage. You belong anywhere I belong. They will stare, she said. Let them, he smiled. You are the most beautiful woman in England. I want them to stare." She laughed despite her nerves. When they entered the ballroom, conversation stopped. Every eye turned to them. Celestine felt her face flush, but she lifted her chin, kept her hand on Alistair's arm. They walked through the crowd. Heads turned, whispers followed. But Alistair did not falter. He introduced her proudly, spoke of her bravery, her intelligence. Slowly, the whispers changed. Some people remained cold, but others were intrigued, impressed. By the end of the night, Celestine had danced with half a dozen lords, had been complimented by a duchess, had been invited to 3 different gatherings. "You see," Alistair said as they rode home, "you were magnificent." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Bravery is not the absence of fear," he said. "It is doing what must be done despite the fear." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "When did you become so wise?" "I married a remarkable woman," he said. "She teaches me something new every day." Lady Vivian was caught 6 months later. She had fled to France, had tried to start a new scheme with a French comte, but someone recognized her. Word reached England. She was extradited. She stood trial in London. The evidence was overwhelming. Blake had testified against her in exchange for a lighter sentence. She was convicted of fraud and conspiracy, sentenced to prison. Celestine attended the trial. She wanted to see it end. When the sentence was read, Lady Vivian looked across the courtroom. Her eyes found Celestine. For a moment, something like regret flickered in her expression. Then it was gone. She was led away. Celestine felt no satisfaction, only sadness. Lady Vivian had been driven by desperation, by fear. But she had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. "Is it wrong that I pity her?" Celestine asked Alistair that night. "No," he said. "It is what makes you who you are. You see the humanity in everyone. Even in those who would harm us? Especially in them." A year after the wedding, Celestine discovered something. She was going through old estate records. Alistair had asked her to help organize them. She had a talent for it. She found a letter. It was addressed to the previous Duke, Alistair's father. It was from her father. Celestine's hands shook as she opened it. The letter was dated 20 years earlier, before she was born. In it, her father wrote of a debt. The old Duke had lent him money when his parish was struggling, had saved his congregation. Her father had never been able to repay the debt, but he had written to thank the Duke, to promise that if there was ever anything he could do in return, he would. At the bottom, the old Duke had written a note. "No repayment necessary. Tell your daughter when she is born that she will always have a place at Ashford Manor if she needs it." Celestine stared at the words. The old Duke had died when she was young, but his son had honored his promise. When Lady Margaret had offered her a position, it had not been simply charity. It had been a promise kept. Celestine brought the letter to Alistair. He read it, looked up at her with wonder in his eyes. "You were always meant to be here," he said. "Perhaps," she said, "or perhaps it was simply kindness." "It was both," he said. He pulled her close. "My father was a good man. He would have loved you." "I wish I had known him." "He would have been so happy," Alistair said, "to know that his kindness brought me the love of my life." 2 years after the wedding, Celestine gave birth to a daughter. They named her Margaret, after Lady Margaret, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep 6 months earlier. The old woman had lived long enough to see Celestine happy, to see the scandal fade, to see love triumph. Celestine held her daughter and thought of all the women who had come before. Lady Margaret, who had lost her love, her own mother, who had died too young. She made a promise to her daughter, that she would teach her to be brave, to fight for what she believed in, to never let fear steal her happiness. Alistair stood beside the bed. He looked at his wife and daughter with such love, that Celestine's heart ached. "She is perfect," he said. "She is ours," Celestine replied. 5 years after the wedding, Celestine and Alistair hosted a ball at Ashford Manor. It was a tradition, one that had lapsed during the scandal, but now they were bringing it back. The ballroom was filled with guests, lords and ladies, families from the county, even some from London. Celestine wore a gown of midnight blue, sapphires at her throat. She looked every inch a duchess, but she had not forgotten where she came from. She moved through the crowd, spoke with everyone, remembered names, asked about families. The servants loved her. The tenants loved her. She had transformed the estate, had started schools for the workers' children, had improved housing. She was not the duchess anyone had expected, but she was the duchess everyone needed. Alistair watched her from across the room. Pride shone in his eyes. Their daughter Margaret ran through the crowd, a whirlwind of dark curls and laughter. She had her father's green eyes, her mother's brave heart. Later, as the dancing began, Alistair found Celestine. "May I have this dance, Your Grace?" he asked with a bow. She laughed. "You may, Your Grace." They moved onto the floor. The music swelled. They danced as they had on their wedding day, as they had 100 times since. But this time, Celestine looked around the ballroom, at the life they had built, the family they had created. She thought of that night 5 years ago, when she had stood outside the library door, when she had heard him laugh with someone else, when she had thought she was too late. She had been so wrong. She had been exactly on time. Because that moment of heartbreak had led to courage. Courage had led to truth. Truth had led to love. "What are you thinking?" Alistair asked. She smiled up at him. "I am thinking about how I almost gave up, how I almost walked away. I am grateful you did not." "So am I." He spun her across the floor. "Do you have any regrets?" She thought about it, about the scandal, the whispers, the struggle. "None," she said. "Not a single one." "Good," he said. He pulled her closer. "Neither do I." The music played on. The candles flickered. And in the center of the ballroom, a duke and his duchess danced. Two people who had found each other despite every obstacle, despite every rule, despite fear itself. Two people who had learned that sometimes being too late is really just being right on time. 10 years after the wedding, Celestine sat in the library. It was her favorite room, always had been. She was writing a letter to Margaret, who was away at school. Their daughter was brilliant, curious, already showing signs of the same bravery her mother possessed. Alistair entered. He had grey at his temples now, lines around his eyes, but he was still the same man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Another letter to our daughter?" he asked. "She worries too much," Celestine said. "I want her to know she is doing wonderfully." He sat beside her, picked up her hand, kissed it. "You are a wonderful mother," he said. "I try," she said. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence only long-married couples can share. "Do you remember," Alistair said, "the first time we spoke, really spoke?" "In this very room," Celestine said. "I corrected your Latin." He laughed. "I was so embarrassed. I was mortified. I thought you would have me dismissed." "I thought you were magnificent," she smiled. "You did not." "I did," he insisted. "I went to my room that night and could not stop thinking about you, about the way you stood up to me. No fear, just truth." "I was terrified," she admitted. "You never showed it." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have had a good life, have we not?" "The best life," he said. "Even with all the scandal, all the struggle." "Especially because of it," he said. It made us who we are, together. Outside, the sun was setting. Golden light streamed through the windows. Celestine thought about that girl she had been, standing in the corridor, hearing laughter, believing she was too late. That girl had been so afraid, so certain that love was beyond her reach. But she had been wrong. Love had not been beyond her reach. It had been waiting for her, just around the corner, just past the fear. All she had needed was courage. "I love you," she said to Alistair. "I love you," he replied. And in the library, where their story had truly begun, they sat together. Two people who had chosen each other, who continued to choose each other every single day. 20 years after the wedding, Celestine became a grandmother. Margaret married a kind man, a scholar. They had a son. They named him Alistair. Celestine held her grandson and marveled at the circle of life, at how far she had come. She was no longer the vicar's daughter with no future. She was a duchess, a mother, a grandmother. But more than that, she was loved. One afternoon, she sat in the garden with her grandson. He was 2 years old, full of energy and questions. Alistair joined them. He moved slower now, but his smile was still warm, his eyes still bright. "Tell me a story, Grandmama," little Alistair said. "What kind of story?" Celestine asked. "A love story," the boy said. Celestine and Alistair exchanged a look, a smile. "Very well," Celestine said. "Once upon a time, there was a girl who thought she had lost her chance at happiness. She heard the man she loved laughing with someone else, and she believed she was too late." "Was she?" the boy asked. "She thought so," Celestine said. "But she was wrong, because sometimes the hardest moments lead to the most beautiful outcomes." "What happened?" the boy asked, entranced. "She found her courage," Celestine said. "She discovered a secret. She saved the man she loved, and in the end, he chose her." "Did they live happily ever after?" the boy asked. Celestine looked at Alistair, at his weathered face, at the love still shining in his eyes. "They did," she said. "They really did." The boy clapped his hands, then he ran off to chase a butterfly. Alistair took Celestine's hand. "It is a good story," he said. "It is our story," she replied. And in the garden, surrounded by roses and sunshine, they sat together, still holding hands, still in love. A duke and a duchess who had defied every rule, who had faced every obstacle, who had proven that love was stronger than fear, stronger than scandal, stronger than anything. From somewhere in the house they heard laughter. Margaret and her husband, playing with their son. Celestine smiled. Laughter had once been the sound that broke her heart, the sound that made her believe she had lost everything. But now, it was the sound of family, of joy, of a life well lived. She had not been too late after all. She had been exactly where she needed to be, exactly when she needed to be there, and that had made all the difference.